At the beginning, someone was thinking that Vanitas Lindworm, a cold-blooded marquis's son who appeared in a certain novel, was a villainous aristocrat who enslaved others and committed countless atrocities, eventually meeting a dark and lonely death. That person realized that they had been reincarnated as that hated character, abandoned by all. Inside a grand palace, Vanitas was sitting in front of a mirror, touching his face as he thought that this was Vanitas's face and that his body looked rather weak. He guessed that he was around 15 years old. He thought that he still had not fully sorted everything out, but little by little his memories were becoming clearer. When he had first woken up, he had not even known who he was. Vanitas' father had called out that Vanitas was awake, while his mother cried out in relief, calling him Vani-chan and thanking goodness. Lying on his bed, Vanitas had noticed that people who seemed to be his parents were crying out of worry and that a butler and a maid stood behind them. According to what they had said, he had been unconscious for 3 whole days and nights. Afterward, Vanitas placed a glass cup on the table, sat on his bed, and thought that back then he had not understood anything. But as his memories returned, he realized that in his previous life, he had lived in a completely different world, one filled with towering skyscrapers and streets overflowing with people. Nostalgic images burnt into his mind. In that world, he had once read a certain novel. Though he could not remember its title, he remembered seeing Vanitas in it. Vanitas had appeared as the antagonist, enslaving the heroines and making them serve him. The protagonist had eventually defeated him, and Vanitas had lost the heroines. In the end, he had been enslaved himself and died alone. Vanitas thought that he did not know why he was here or who he really was, but if he lived as he was now, he would be doomed. With a serious expression, he gripped his hands and refused to accept that fate. From then on, he started gathering information. After placing books on the table, he said aloud that it was time to do this. Sitting on a chair and reading, Vanitas thought about the inevitable duel with the protagonist. He concluded that it was most likely an unavoidable event and wondered if there was any way to win. Suddenly, he said the word magic in surprise, realizing that in this world, there existed something called magic. Magic that manipulated fire and water, and magic that could alter the appearance of people and objects. These magic spells allowed the caster to make almost anything possible through imagination. In the novel, the only magic Vanitas had ever used was a basic long-range spell called Light Arrow. However, if his memory was correct, this world contained a long-lost magic that had been deemed impossible to master, a magic so difficult that it had been completely forgotten aside from him, the reincarnated one. Standing up in shock, Vanitas realized that this was it. He recalled that this magic had only been mentioned as part of the world's myth, a fan service by the author. Suddenly, his hand began to glow, and he recognized it as Domination Magic, the ability to manipulate the magic floating in space to control all matter at will. Then, the glow disappeared, and Vanitas thought that it looked like it would take some time before he could use it properly. Still, he smiled and thought that with this power, he might be able to change his doomed fate. The scene then shifted back to the palace, where Vanitas was sleeping in bed. He mumbled in his sleep, sat up with a yawn, and wondered if it was morning already. He thought that he had spent most of the previous night reading magic tomes. As expected of a marquis's house, their collection was quite impressive. When he heard a knock on the door, he thought that the people there were nice. A maid entered with tea and nervously greeted him with a good morning, telling him that his clothes and a drink were ready. Sitting on his bed, Vanitas told her to just leave them there, and she agreed. As he continued reading, he noticed something peculiar. The maids in the house were stiff in their movements. Watching her shake, Vanitas realized that the reason was obvious. Suddenly, the maid shouted nervously that his hand was on her. Vanitas looked down and saw that his hand was on her buttocks. He responded absent-mindedly, realizing his mistake, and the maid ran away, begging to be excused. Looking at his hand, Vanitas thought that apparently, the original Vanitas used to grope the maids and resort to violence. His hand had moved unconsciously. He thought that even if his personality had changed after reincarnation, old habits must die hard. He decided that he could not afford to dwell on that incident because that day was a special one. As he changed his clothes, he thought that there were likely 2 key reasons behind Vanitas' downfall, the first being losing to the protagonist, and the second being losing his 3 enslaved heroines. He concluded that even if he defeated the protagonist, it would be meaningless if the heroines ran away. Vanitas recalled their names and backgrounds. Christina Marcha was a noble lady of high birth, whose dignity and beauty made her seem anything but a slave. Hildegard was a cheerful, battle-loving foreign knight. Rapina was a beastkin with rare, lustrous black fur. Vanitas thought that on that day, for the first time, he would meet these 3. It was his chance to build a good relationship with the ones who held his fate, but more than that, he truly wanted to meet them. In his hazy memories, their smiling faces shone brightly. However, when Vanitas finally saw them, those smiling heroines appeared instead with scared and lifeless expressions. Their eyes were dead. Marcia addressed him as Master, and Rapana asked what his command was for the day. Vanitas looked at them tensely, realizing that slaves who had suffered under Vanitas' cruelty could not possibly think fondly of him. But he could not leave things as they were. He apologized for calling them there suddenly, saying that he had just wanted to see them. Their faces remained tense. Vanitas called Christina to come closer, and she obeyed hesitantly. He thought that in the novel, there had been a scene where Christina complimented Vanitas' looks, and if that detail held any significance, he should test it. As she approached, he greeted her warmly. Christina blushed and flinched, pushing him back and apologizing. He cut her words short, admitting that he had gotten too close, and told her that he had simply wanted to see her face up close. He admired her smooth skin and strong, clear eyes, saying that the more he looked, the more beautiful she seemed. Christina blushed harder and said that he should not say such strange things, calling him unfair. Vanitas noticed that she averted her gaze and thought that Christina probably did like Vanitas's looks, so if someone she despised complimented her beauty, that reaction made sense. Next, he called Rapana, who trembled as she responded. Vanitas thought that out of the three, Rapana had suffered the worst abuse from Vanitas because of her small stature and quiet nature. There had even been scenes in the novel where Vanitas had physically assaulted her. Rapana sat on his lap, blushing and making distress sounds. Christina panicked and questioned what Vanitas was doing. Vanitas wondered if Rapana really thought he was about to hurt her. Raising his hand gently, he patted her head and complimented her fur, saying that it was so soft he could touch it forever. Rapana blushed even harder, stammering and trembling. Christina nervously asked him not to be too rough, but Vanitas said that he still wanted to touch Rapana a little longer, asking if it was not okay. Rapana blushed, letting out small, flustered sounds, and Vanitas noted that it looked like she was fine with it. He asked if he could touch her tail too, and Rapana made more shy noises. Christina, blushing as she watched them, finally shouted at Vanitas to stop, pulling Rapana back and pleading for him to just tell them what he needed or wanted to do. Rapana remained flustered, and Vanitas thought to himself that it was a shame because he had wanted to touch her more. He wondered if he had made her even more wary of him. Looking at them, Vanitas thought that the only one left was Hildegard, who had been watching him for a while. Hildegard said that her master was strong but weak but strong. Vanitas, taken aback, remembered that Hildegard was the daughter of a warrior from the Lepid tribe. The Lepid tribe respected the strong and protected the weak. Vanitas, who had been weak in both physical strength and magic, had originally been someone Hildegard was supposed to protect. But now, as she looked at him, she instinctively felt that he was not Vanitas. Hildegard then said that she wanted to fight her master and find out the truth. Vanitas, understanding that her clan valued strength, accepted her challenge. Soon, they stood together in an open field. Vanitas prepared himself for the mock battle and thought about testing his newfound ability. He invoked Domination Magic, determined to give it a little test to see just how powerful it truly was. Vanitas stated that they should be fine there, and then told Hildegard that it was time to begin their mock battle. Vanitas thought that Hildegard was the daughter of the warriors of the Lepid tribe. He knew that if it were a real fight, he would not walk away unscathed, but this mock battle was an opportunity. Vanitas wanted to test his power, Domination Magic, and see if he could use it in an actual battle. Christina shouted that it was far too dangerous and insisted that if it was a mock battle he wanted, she could do it just like they usually did. Vanitas refused, saying that then there would be no point. This was an opportunity for him to show everyone how much he had changed. Reborn as a reincarnator, he declared himself as the new Vanitas Lindworm. Christina and Rapana were both shocked at his words. Vanitas then told Hildegard that she did not have to hold back. Hildegard acknowledged his command and said she would fight. Taking a fighting stance, she immediately launched a mud shot. Both Christina and Rapana were shocked. As the mud was about to hit, Vanitas raised his hand and called to activate, but the mud struck him directly. Christina, Rapana, and Hildegard were all in shock. Vanitas fell to the ground, and Rapana ran forward, asking if he was all right. Christina shouted that this was exactly why she had warned him and that it was too dangerous. While lying on the ground, Vanitas muttered in frustration and then, while standing up and laughing, said that there was no way it would work just by testing it on the spot. He told Hildegard to come at him just like before. Christina, with a worried face, called out to him, but Vanitas reassured her that he would be fine. While wiping the mud off his face, he thought that Hildegard's magic should be mud-based. He already knew he would get some injuries but told everyone to continue. Hildegard agreed nervously and continued the mock battle, launching multiple mud shots. Vanitas dodged them swiftly, astonishing both Christina and Rapana. Christina quietly uttered Vanitas' name in disbelief. Hildegard fired another round of mud shots, and Vanitas, seeing them coming, raised his hand to take the direct hit while covering his eyes from the mud. Hildegard smiled at the exchange. As the scene shifted upward to the sky, Vanitas stood before Hildegard, his lovely face covered in mud. Christina, watching, murmured in concern about his face being covered. Breathing heavily, Vanitas asked Hildegard if she was having fun. Hildegard smiled and replied that the master was still weak but stronger than before and that it was fun. Vanitas, still huffing, announced that this would be the last one, and that he would show her what he could do. Hildegard's smile faded, and she asked if they were seriously going to fight. Vanitas confirmed and told her to come at him with everything she had. Christina and Rapana both had tense faces. Hildegard responded that this would be her full power and began to chant a spell. She shouted, "Mud Spiral Bomb," as she launched it. Both Christina and Rapana looked alarmed. Vanitas invoked Domination Magic, raising his hand to dismantle the spell. The attack was destroyed. Christina, astonished, exclaimed in disbelief that the master had deflected the magic. Immediately afterward, Vanitas dashed toward Hildegard, grabbed her hand, and used magic to seal her movements. Hildegard fell to the ground, bound and blushing, exclaiming that she could not move and asking what this was. Vanitas knelt in front of Hildegard and explained that this was all the power he could muster at the moment. Using Domination Magic, he was concentrating the mana in the atmosphere. Right now, even if Hildegard gave it her all, she would not be able to move. He reassured her that there was no need to worry, as the binding would soon be undone. Then, suddenly, Vanitas collapsed to the ground. Both Christina and Rapana screamed his name and rushed to him. Christina lifted his body into her arms, asking if he was okay. Vanitas, breathing weakly, said that he was fine and apologized, addressing her as Fuku. The binding spell then ended, and Hildegard, looking confused, softly called out to her master. Vanitas looked at Hildegard, and Hildegard told him that what he did was amazing, but that he seemed different from before, as if he were a completely different person. Christina, still tense, asked what exactly a reincarnated one was. Vanitas remained silent for a moment, then lay back on the ground, saying that he was who he was, and that their previous master, the one who had oppressed them, was gone. Christina, Rapana, and Hildegard were all shocked. Christina asked what he meant by that. Vanitas explained that getting told such a thing out of nowhere must be confusing, but from that moment on, he would be fighting against fate. For that, he would need the strength of all three of them. Vanitas called out Christina's name, and Christina immediately responded nervously. He then called Rapana, who replied softly. Finally, he called Hildegard, who answered with a smile. Vanitas told them that he knew there was still much they did not understand, but he wanted them to come with him. Raising his hand toward them, he said that he would be counting on all three of them from now on.
By the way, if you enjoyed the video, maybe consider liking and subscribing? Pretty please?